During the Great Depression, millions of Americans were stripped of everything: homes, jobs, and any sense of security. Yet out on the railways and back roads, a hidden brotherhood of survivalists thrived against the odds. These were the hobos, resourceful drifters who learned to live entirely off what society threw away. They weren't beggars or criminals. They were the invisible engineers of survival, men and women who mastered scavenging into an art form. Their skills kept them alive in one of the hardest times in modern history. And what's more surprising is how many of their methods still work today. Today, we're going deep into the scavenging tricks that made Depression-era hobos not just endure, but endure with grit, community and cleverness that rivals any modern survival tactic. Hobo scavenging was built on observation, not luck. Hobos didn't survive by chance. They survived by paying attention. Every rail yard, every back alley, and every town dump held potential resources, but only if you knew how to read the landscape. A good hobo could size up an entire area in minutes, noting where food scraps might be dumped, where factories left usable discards, or where rainwater collected safely. In a time before organized recycling, America threw away an astonishing amount of material. Tin cans, old newspapers, burlap sacks, broken tools. What most saw as trash, hobos saw as opportunity. They learned to locate hotel and restaurant dumpsters, often waiting until nightfall to retrieve still edible scraps of bread or half-spoiled vegetables. Rail depots and warehouses were another gold mine. Wooden crates could be broken down for firewood, tin lids hammered flat into makeshift knives or reflectors, and discarded wire repurposed for traps or cooking rigs. Modern survivalists can apply this principle directly. Never just look at an environment, read it. Whether it's an abandoned lot, a campsite, or, a storm-damaged neighborhood, everything lying around has a second purpose if you think like a scavenger. The key isn't luck, it's observation and adaptation. While scavenging was essential, it wasn't a free-for-all. Hobos lived by a set of rules known as the Hobo Code, a hand-carved system of symbols and unwritten ethics that kept the community alive. One of those rules was simple but profound. Take only what you need and leave enough for the next traveller. That mindset made scavenging sustainable, even with thousands of men passing through the same towns. For example, a hobo might leave a small mark, a circle with 2 parallel lines, on a fence post near a friendly household, signalling that others could safely ask for water or food there. Another mark might warn that a farmer was hostile or that the dogs were dangerous. These codes also extended to scavenging grounds. Certain trash sites were understood to be open, while others, especially near hobo jungles, the informal camps along rail lines, were shared zones where resources were rationed. The takeaway here is timeless. Scavenging, whether in a Depression-era rail town or during modern survival scenarios, works best when guided by ethics and communication. In prepping communities today, sharing signals, like coloured markers for water sources or hazard areas, echoes that same code. Organised mutual survival is always stronger than solitary desperation. One of the most ingenious tricks hobos used was transforming industrial waste into practical gear. For instance, discarded coffee cans became everything from cooking pots to lanterns. By punching a few holes in the base and threading a wire handle, they could heat soup or stew directly over a campfire. Tin lids, once flattened, were used as spoons or reflective beacons for signalling across tracks. Shelter building was another critical art. Hobos often slept near rail yards or in wooded areas just outside towns. They used torn tarps, burlap, or wax paper as insulation against damp ground. Discarded newspaper, crumpled and layered, served as both bedding and insulation, a trick that modern homeless individuals still use effectively. Even the way they built fires showed precision. A hobo fire was small, often shielded by a tin or brick wall to hide the light from passing police or rail guards. So, to try a practical version of this today, anyone learning survival craft can practice micro-shelter building using scavenged materials. You start with the same principle. A waterproof layer below, like plastic, bark or tarp, then an insulation layer in the middle, maybe dry leaves or cardboard, and finally a windbreak above, such as scrapboards or cloth. It's not glamorous, but honestly, it's field-proven and built on the same logic Depression-era hobos lived by. The best scavengers weren't just good with their hands, they were good with people too. Hobos learned which days grocery stores and bakeries threw out their stock. Old bread and bruised fruit were often discarded behind markets around closing time. Now, those who approached respectfully, sometimes offering small chores in exchange for leftovers, could build relationships with local staff. In many small towns, bakers and farmers quietly helped hobos, understanding that hunger could strike anyone. They also foraged the wild, you know. Railroad tracks cut through hundreds of miles of rural countryside, which meant hobos became skilled in finding edible weeds, wild onions, berries and mushrooms. Quite often, folks would carry a tin can of beans or corn as their base meal, you know, and then they'd add wild greens or whatever scraps they could find to stretch it into a sort of stew. For anyone hoping to build a bit of resilience these days, that mix of timing, diplomacy and field knowledge still really matters. You need to know when waste cycles happen, like when supermarkets are discounting produce, or when farms leave gleanings after the harvest. If you combine that awareness with some basic foraging skills, well, you're already tapping into one of the oldest self-reliant systems in the country. What kept a hobo alive wasn't just what he managed to find, but what he chose to carry. Every single item had to earn its place, no exceptions. A bedroll, a tin cup, a knife, a sewing needle, and some twine. Those few things could solve 100 problems, honestly. The lighter you travelled, the more ground you could cover, and, well, the more chances to find resources before others did. This minimalist ethic is, you know, something modern survivalists are rediscovering. The hobo kit was, in effect, the first bug-out bag. Everything had dual or even triple use. A coat became a sleeping roll, a bandana became a water filter, and a coffee can served as both pot and bowl. Recreating such a setup today is actually simple. Just go through your gear and ask whether each item has more than one use. If not, maybe rethink it. The Depression taught that carrying less wasn't weakness, it was efficiency. Despite their loner reputation, hobos rarely survived alone. They shared tools, pooled meals and passed information along the rail lines about safe towns or police crackdowns. In many camps, food was communally cooked and repairs were done collectively. The smartest scavengers weren't the greediest. They were the ones who helped others survive. That principle still matters today. You know, in any crisis, whether it's economic, natural or social, isolated survival really does have its limits. Building small cooperative networks where skills and resources are shared, well, it multiplies your chances of getting through hard times. It's exactly how Depression-era hobos endured the long winters, by being resourceful together. The scavenging tricks of Depression-era hobos weren't acts of desperation. They were acts of ingenuity. These men and women took a collapsing world and carved out systems of survival using observation, ethics, and relentless adaptability. They turned garbage into gear, hunger into discipline, and loneliness into community. Their story is a reminder that survival doesn't start with tools, it starts with mindset. Learn to read your environment, value every scrap, and help those who share your path. That's how the hobos made it through one of the darkest chapters in American history, and those same lessons could guide anyone through hard times today. If you found this exploration valuable, subscribe to Echoes of Valor for more deep dives into forgotten survival history. Share this episode with someone who loves practical history, because these old-world skills aren't just relics, they're blueprints for resilience.